Welcome to Powered by Authenticity. Tonight, I am so excited for this conversation. When Jenny Chen and I connected, we had such a fun introductory conversation, and I felt like she had been a friend for a very long period of time. And I know that's just going to come through for everybody who is on our subscribers and our listeners, and for those that are watching live with us, because we love a good live podcast recording as well. So everyone, welcome Jenny Chen. Welcome to Powered by Authenticity. How are you tonight?
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. And we just experienced a couple of tech issues with my laptop. So I'm joining on my iPad. I hope it doesn't blow up because I don't know how old this iPad is. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. And if I knew it was going to be a super casual conversation, I would have brought a margarita with me because it's 6 p.m., right? And after work. So
We highly encourage a cocktail at Powered by Authenticity. We're just friends getting together to chat. So yeah, we highly encourage that. But how would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
yeah, so my name is Jenny Chen. I'm dialing in from Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. I'm a first generation Chinese Canadian immigrant who came here in 1989. I spent a lot of my childhood in Plano, Texas, actually. So, for all the listeners in the US, I joke that I actually lost my Chinese accent there and picked up a Texan accent. So, when I get really excited, you hear me drop like a dang, a y'all, and a howdy. Especially when I'm yelling at my husband at doing something. So I have two daughters. One is 18 who just started biomedical mechanical engineering in the fall, and another one who is in middle school at 12 years old. And we have a golden doodle named Eugene. And outside of work, I'm a total foodie who really just loves the idea of story sharing and coming together as community and family around a table. So that's a little bit about me on the personal side.
That's awesome. Now, were you as excited as we were to watch the Blue Jays in the World Series? Did you watch any of that? Are you a baseball fan?
So I've watched baseball a lot because my husband is a huge baseball fan. Like, we've been to a Yankees game at Yankee Stadium. I followed as closely as I could the World Series, but
Yeah.
I saw this meme, Emily, that said, like, when the ball got lodged under the boards, somebody said, I've never in my entire life seen that happen before. And then I realized I only started watching baseball like 9 days ago. And I felt like that was me yelling at the TV and just being like, oh, I can't believe that happened. I've never seen that happen. But I'm like, I don't watch baseball that often to know if that happens or not. So, but yes, we were sad about the outcome here in Canada, but
Yep.
what a monumental and like historical event to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny because in Buffalo, the Buffalo Bisons are the Toronto Blue Jays farm team. So we're
Mm.
highly invested, not just because we love our family and friends, and we spent Thanksgiving up there in October and had the Jays game on in the background, but also the connection for Buffalo and the Jays. So
I love that.
yeah, for sure. But well, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to get to know you a little bit more and share your story with all of our listeners. We do like to do an icebreaker, and you did mention food, and we do think that food is one of the greatest connectors that we can have as human beings. And really wanted to know your favorite type of meal. Is it upscale, fine dining?
Ooh,
Tailgating? What's a good favorite type of meal that you love to have?
I love a good tailgate, but I will say that I'm definitely like a sit down dinner person. So
Yeah.
I love those evenings where like you open a few bottles of wine, either at home or at a restaurant, and you break bread. I once had a friend say you don't break bread with people you don't like. And
Yeah.
so just, coming together really getting to know people, sharing stories around a sit down dinner anywhere. It can be high end, it could be super casual. Yeah, those are my favorite kinds of meals.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think that it's so fun at the end of the day. And I remember during COVID, because I'm in healthcare, it was really hard to have a sit down meal. And it
Mm.
was just something I really missed. You sit down as a family, you talk, your friends, you share stories. And so if it's tailgate, if we love a good oyster night and have fun.
Ooh,
So
that's a staple in our family. My 18-year-old for her birthday, she gets 100 oysters at
what?
a local seafood shop called Pelican Seafood. Yeah, she'll like crush 100 oysters by herself. So luckily they have like buck-a-shuck during those times that we
Yeah.
take her to, not at $4 a pop.
I like to say one of the best meals that I can have is give me some fresh oysters and a side of fries and either a nice glass of wine, champagne, sometimes a martini, and just let me be for the night.
Sounds like the perfect evening.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Like I said, food we feel is one of the great connectors, and we love to get to know our guests on a little personal level. So I appreciate that. Okay, so I want you to share about your company, Catalais Consulting.
Yeah. I mean, where do I start? So when I started in corporate finance, yeah, how long do we have? I started my company after 16 years in corporate finance, Emily, and I really wanted to be intentional about what I was building and also what it stood for. And so even the name Catalyst comes from the Gaelic term catalyst,
Yep.
which is perfect because I'm not here to own the work through strategic consulting. We really want to be the spark that helps leaders and organizations think differently, help them evolve, and then also grow without leaving talent or opportunity on the table. And my logo, it's funny enough that it's also a Gaelic symbol, but it's for eternal balance because I chose it thinking that throughout my career, I feel like there's a misconception out there that you can't have an incredible culture, right? And have a thriving, high performing business.
Yeah.
Because really, when you invest in your people, like the heart of your company, you naturally protect your bottom line. And so that's what Catalyst Consulting does is we really help organizations embed inclusive, equitable practices, respect, and humanity backed into how they operate, not just as a side project, but really as the foundation, and showing them that this is how they increase their bottom line.
Yeah. I love that. I don't think that there's enough focus where organizations put the human component into how that affects the bottom line.
No, they don't. And I think I actually learned that because I was a producer, like an individual contributor
Yep.
in our investment sales force for so long. And really, like high performing, highly engaged teams, right? They're highly motivated. They have to have a culture where they feel like they want to thrive here. Like they want to work for you and they want to work hard for you and your clients and whatever you stand
Yep.
for. And so, yeah, I think that when I started hearing organizations treat their high performers or their sales force like almost like numbers, it
Yep.
was that was when I realized there's a gap here, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's very interesting to me. The other thing I'm curious about is if you could share is you started out in investment and in financial planning. And now
Yeah.
you've made this journey into diversity leadership. Tell us about that. How did you find your way from it? Because when you talk, you're so passionate about what you're doing now. How did you make that journey?
I feel like I've been a why person my entire
Okay.
life. So I've always been inherently curious, but my journey isn't linear. Like most of our careers, we end up in something accidentally or because
Yep.
universe or right. And so I feel like I've always been intrinsically curious. And so even working with clients in investment sales,
Yeah.
why they, not just what they needed, but why they needed it, and understanding in order to help them with their financial planning, wealth management. And that same curiosity carried me into HR because even as an individual producer, and I was often the only woman or the only
Yep.
visible minority, but I never saw myself as different. And I really just thought that all the things that I went through were just part of what we needed to do to succeed.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I started being tasked with empowering other women into these key investment sales roles that are still very much underrepresented. I think there's about
Yeah.
20% women across the industry, across North America, in these roles still, that I was looking at things like, hey, well, that doesn't make sense. And, those are still the no's that I'm getting in my career. And now you're asking me to put other women at the door, but only for that door to be locked.
Yep.
So I started challenging some of the infrastructures that we had in place. I started challenging some ideology, I think, in our ecosystem that were holding women back, but also a lot of people back. And I was tasked then with being the leader for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the entire firm. So, like I said, some things just happen accidentally. But when I finally got there, Emily, I still kept asking why. Like, why have we created all of these separate silos and pillars to correct for historical imbalances, right, in our
Yep.
workplaces? And why did inclusion sometimes end up feeling more exclusive than inclusive, like all women's events that we were creating, programs specifically targeting, Black, Latino, Hispanic, Indigenous, racialized employees. And so when I peeled back the layers because of my curiosity, what I saw was that a lot of these challenges that we're trying to solve for, like racism, sexism, microaggressions, really came down to a lack of basic human respect for each other, compassion, and understanding of one another's lived experiences. And so, even when you look at underrepresentation, for women specifically, that's not a diversity issue.
Right.
That's a talent management infrastructure issue, right? Like we haven't redesigned our workplaces to a place where women weren't allowed to work 60 years ago. And we're
Hmm.
still working in these infrastructures that were built, 100 years ago. And so if your workforce, Emily, doesn't have 50% women in every single level, how, or if it doesn't reflect the communities that we are
Yeah.
surrounded by today, like we're not just leaving people out from a talent perspective, we're actually leaving business opportunities out,
Right.
innovation, and future growth. So yeah, that's the shift and evolution into why I even created this consulting firm in the first place, because we also can't drive this change that we need, Emily, like one organization at a time, one
Yep.
industry at a time, because it is a global issue.
It is. Yeah, and it's funny, I talk to, people across different verticals, and it is truly an issue across different verticals. Now you have some which obviously are specialized, and that makes sense, but
Yeah.
tech, healthcare, senior leadership on the in the top 50 firms, there's a problem there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned, so you definitely the impact to innovation, profitability is one other thing that organizations they don't realize that when you don't have an equitable, diverse perspective being represented at the table, there's profits that are being left behind because you're leaving out a whole viewpoint that's not present to help you innovate and make new product.
Well, I'll give you an example. This summer, my youngest daughter wanted to take up tennis.
Okay.
We don't play tennis in our family, but we were very happy to support her. And we even, signed up for family tennis lessons. I spent an inordinate amount of money buying all of the cute outfits, all of the equipment for all four of us. And we signed her up for tennis camp where she was not only the only girl at the camp, but also
Yeah.
the only visible minority. And the first day, like all of the boys, even the more novice boys, picked on her because she was the
Oh,
only. And every time she made a mistake, they would chirp her to the point that she actually sat herself out. And I didn't love that, but I mean, kids are going to be kids, so
yeah,
I can't blame them for it. But it was the way that the leadership and also the camp dealt with that situation
yeah.
made it was so disappointing to me, and she didn't want to go back there. And
Oh,
I said to the president of the tennis club that, what a missed opportunity, because if she, as the only, had such a great experience there, we would have brought our friends' kids, we
yep,
would have
yep,
invited other people who had never played tennis before, because we want her to have other friends there and other
yeah,
girls in that tennis camp. But because of that experience, it actually closed the door for our entire network of people to
yeah,
explore tennis in our region. And I use the Taylor Swift effect for that, Emily, because look at what Taylor Swift did for the NFL. It
yeah,
had the Super Bowl had more viewership than the moon landing. It brought $1 billion into the NFL just from Swifties wanting to catch Taylor Swift at
yeah.
a Chiefs game, right? And the
It's true.
NFL did such a good job, like wrapping their arms around these fans, because they knew that if you make them feel like they belong here,
Yep,
you can now get an entire next generation of NFL fans and consumers. And so, what a missed opportunity for those legacy football players at the time. We
yep,
heard it all, which was like, not my sport,
yep,
like, get out of my sport. And they don't think of it as like the continuity of this industry, right? And so, yeah,
yeah.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I love the Taylor Swift analogy. I think about how the demographic changed for NFL viewership as soon as Taylor Swift started showing up to those games. There
Yeah,
were
it was like an increase of like something crazy, like 26% women between the ages of 12 and 40
yep,
flooded in to
yep,
want to watch football,
yep.
right? And so yeah.
It's just crazy to me. Now here in Buffalo, we have Haley Steinfeld because she married Josh Allen.
Ah,
So
I, I love
was
that.
yeah, it is interesting though to me. The other thing you mentioned is is around perspective. So I think the other thing that isn't always reminded of everyone at the table is that everybody has a unique perspective and everybody should be heard. And I think when people don't look at inclusion as just that, as in including everybody's voices, everybody being heard, again, there's such a missed opportunity to be able to expand, whether it's product revenue, even just how people feel, which drives to culture. It's being missed, like that soft skill of just being heard and hearing others' perceptions, as it's a lost art form right now, I think, in the workforce as well.
Yeah, and it goes back to, I think we talked about it on our pre-call, is
Yep.
really like the impact of storytelling,
Yes.
because I we saw it, like we see it play out all the time. Like our, I'm not going to get into politics, but
Yep.
our political party leader during the election, our conservative party leader, said something like, racism doesn't exist unless you talk about racism. And I'm like, well, first of all, as a first generation Chinese Canadian immigrant woman, I can tell you that's not how racism works, because I really believe that storytelling and learning about our different experiences is how we bridge the gaps in understanding. And
Yep.
it, you know, how we, who we are, like where we come from, what shaped us. It doesn't, it's not even like a cultural thing, like an ethnic minority thing. It's a, everybody is shaped by
Absolutely.
their unique experiences and see the
Yep.
world in a different lens. And that's how we start closing these gaps in empathy, I think, understanding, right?
Yep.
And even problem solving.
Yep. No, I love that. And the other thing I just curious about your perspective on is, and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit here, but the importance for leaders to understand that this isn't a feel good initiative, but it's really one because of driving successful income. So we've touched upon it, but I love, and I know we talked about this in our pre-call, is that feel good. This isn't
Yeah.
about feeling good. This is about actual change.
I think you read my mind, or at least maybe read my last LinkedIn newsletter article, because I literally said that the most performative term in the workplace today is inclusive leadership.
Mhm.
Because inclusive leadership, like, what does that even mean? Right? Like,
Right.
it's become such become also a buzzword. And like, being an inclusive leader is like 99.9% of your job as a people manager.
Yep.
And it just means that you are leading with curiosity, empathy, respect, and accountability for your teams that you manage. And
Yep.
also, understanding that your experience doesn't shape somebody else's reality in your
Yep.
workplace. And I think that's where we've gone off track, because we've even over engineered what we think a good leader should be. But it's like really grounded in, you know leadership is grounded in compassion. It's
Yep.
like grounded in the skills to see people for who they are, their
Yep.
potential, their value, and guiding them. And so I was really tired of hearing leaders say, I don't have time to do DEI. Right? Like, I don't have time to be an inclusive leader. I have to worry about our profit margins, our bottom line, and all that. And I'm just like, you don't have time to understand who makes up your team
Right.
and how to lead them? That's a weird thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I really think that it's become performative. So if we can just like bring it back to the basics of what inclusive leadership really means. It means respecting your team members, supporting them, leading them in a way that they feel they belong and want to thrive on your team.
Yeah. Well, I think you're hitting on such an important topic, because the other thing that this goes to is we're not giving leaders guidance as they develop into leaders. I mean, this isn't a lost area where we're either not setting people up for success. We give them the promotion, but not the support into that type of role.
Yeah.
I know I've seen people go from even, and I'll just use a smaller promotion type of thing, but a a software engineer going into a project management role. You're no longer responsible for actually putting keys to keyboard to make the product. You're responsible for the every aspect of managing that product coming to life, and they don't get guidance. So they
Yeah.
don't understand that I need to take that engineer's hat off and now actually be a leader. And
Yeah.
I think there's missing components in just the overall leadership experience for people as well.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a gap. So it's so funny that you bring this up because well, I guess it's a sneak peek now, but I will be launching in January a webinar series that cover exactly this topic because we have told leaders what they need to do
Yep.
and why they need to do it, and nobody ever stopped to say how they're supposed to get there.
Yes.
Like, what an incredible gap, right? To
Yep.
your point, you get to the top of your subject matter expert, technical skill expertise, and all of a sudden, they have you leading an entire arm of an organization. Well, nobody gave you the skills to
Right.
manage large teams or inspire people to want
Yep.
to follow you. And so even subjects like mentorship and sponsorship.
Yep.
Yeah, you should actually go out and sponsor and mentor people. Okay, how do I do that? And
Right.
so hopefully I can, bridge some of those gaps in across sectors, but also from an employee standpoint too.
Yep.
So on the topic of mentorship, sponsorship, not only how to be one, but also how to prepare yourself in your career to have a mentor, to
Yep.
have a sponsor. Those are all things, concepts that we overuse,
Yep.
but nobody's told us the how.
Yeah. No, I love that. What a great, series that will be, like, 'cause it's missing.
It
And
is missing.
you see these leaders, how uncomfortable is it for them? And then just even more uncomfortable to be an employee trying to perform under a leader who doesn't even know what it means to actually be in that position.
I agree. And I also don't think that we have created an infrastructure where we can comfortably, transparently provide feedback. Because that's another thing is like I feel like feedback is fuel, and every time I've shifted my perspective or grown or learned something new as
Yep.
a person, as a professional, is because somebody gave me the feedback and also the grace and the room to evolve and to learn from it and grow. So
Yep.
I've been in so many situations where we don't even provide a leader feedback on how they're choosing to show up or how
Yep.
they've shown up in this meeting or how they spoke to an employee because it's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yep.
But some people don't know any better, but everybody has the opportunity and the desire to want to be better. So if we
Yep.
can just create these infrastructures in our organizations where feedback is fuel again, very simple concept, but not
Yep.
utilized enough, right? Then
Yep.
we'll have so many leaders that actually want to evolve and
Yep.
do better.
Yep. No, I agree, and, it's so funny because a lot people don't also know how to receive feedback, like, they put their armor up, their guard
Yeah.
up, and instead, let yourself down, hear the other like, you've gotta have open dialogue, you can't have it be a one-way, conversation, but that growth that can happen during that uncomfortable conversation is paramount to what you can achieve for yourself in the next even few weeks. Like, you can take a moment, you can reflect, you can transform the way you're doing something and come out in a small amount of time that performing that much more. And I really wish, to your point, and I'm glad to hear that you're talking about this, because we need to understand that having difficult conversations is actually a champion for growth, opportunity, and success.
Yeah. And on the receiving end of feedback, like to your point, it is very difficult. And I would
Yeah.
just say for the understand coming from
Yep.
giving that feedback because I've been told in my previous life that I wasn't nice enough, right? Like I need to be
Yes.
nicer. So then I so then I became nicer, more timid, all these things. And then when I went for a leadership role, oh, you're too nice,
Yep.
right? And so like find out what that feedback is about. It has to be tangible for you to be able to grow.
Yep.
Otherwise, sometimes people give feedback because it's their own implicit biases, right?
Yep.
And their own blinders on. Like even at the most senior level of my career, I was told I, didn't look or talk like an executive, and I'm like, what do executives talk like?
Right.
Right? And so where does that feedback come from? Is it
Yep.
feedback? Is it criticism? So,
Right.
we have to be very intentional on both sides of the coin there.
Yeah, I agree, and it's so funny that you say that because a lot of times it's like I'm being too bold, too forward, too, whatever, but yet my male counterpart said the same thing yesterday and was acknowledged and supported and, praised for that. So I think there's some of that still that happens, but being able to your point, understand where it's coming from so that you can also, digest it in a different way as well.
Oh, that's a whole other topic. Like we could do a part two on that
Okay,
topic.
we
Just
can do
like,
that.
yeah, email tones. Like if I respond
Oh
without
gosh.
like 80 exclamation marks and like happy faces, all of a
Yeah.
sudden people are like, oh, Jenny's having a bad day. You know?
That's fantastic. Well, you're right, that could probably be a part 2. Alright, so you've gone out on your own. It's overwhelming. I've been through it. I've, recently done it as well. There are some, eh, challenges that I'm sure that you have felt. Can you share a little bit about some of those challenges you may have felt, coming out of, corporate into entrepreneurship?
I mean, I think actually you had a previous guest on, Shannon. I think
Yep.
I even commented on your post about it because, she said that, coming out of her 20-year career, it was like her identity was tied to her career. And so I remember actually that moment hit me listening to her words because that's exactly how I felt.
Yep.
I started my career at 22, maybe 23. I was a young mom. I didn't have any background in finance. Like I grew up in that organization, in the culture, in the world of finance. And so I I didn't know how to be who I was, what I stood for. And so rebuilding myself outside in the last year, I would say, has been an interesting journey. It's been very difficult because
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, Emily, I told you before I had this conversation with my husband that I'm like, sometimes I'm just gonna, like if you come home and I have udon noodles between my feet is because I've given up and I'm starting to sell feed photos on the internet. Sorry, LinkedIn, but realistically, like it is a challenge because entrepreneurship, you cannot just will things to happen,
Yep.
right? It's like
Yep.
the harder you work, nothing happens on the other side sometimes for a really long time. And you don't know when your next client's coming from. People most of the time don't even know what you do.
Yep.
Right? Like half of the people that reach out to me think I'm a leadership coach. I'm like, no, I'm not a leadership coach, but I have a lot of friends that are leadership coaches that I
Yep.
can refer you to. Right. And so, yeah, just redefining yourself and having people understand what you stand for when your entire brand was built within one organization.
Yep. Yeah, I feel that. When I lost my job, I was like, "Well, there it goes." It's like,
Yeah.
okay, what do you do? And you have to build yourself back up, and it to your point, where's the next client coming from? Where's the next check coming from? There's a client escalation. I'm not quite sure what to do because somebody even at the C level, you still had a board of directors that you went to. Well, you are your own board of directors at that point in time when you're on your own. So it's interesting being out here as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and you're your own EA
Yep.
for a little while. You're your own tech support. I always tell my friends that I need to I need to fire my tech support, but I can't because it's me.
Yeah.
And but I would say that the part I felt too, Emily, I'm from Ottawa. I've always been in Ottawa.
Yeah.
But for a lot of my career, the last 6 years anyways, I worked out of Toronto and Chicago. And how many people coming back to this community trying to rebuild my brand, even on home turf, so
Yep.
many people would come up to me and say, I've never heard of you before, I've never seen you before. And those words actually really cut deep, because it was
Yep.
like the last 16 years of my career didn't matter, and like, who am I, right?
Yeah.
Like you
For
start
sure.
to feel invalidated that your entire career. So I would even caution the people that are listening in right now that like our words matter. And so just even choosing words that don't make people feel closed off, or
Yep.
how they can be feel like you don't belong here,
Yep.
basically. Never heard of you before, you don't belong here. Just using our words a little bit more wisely really helps make people feel seen and valued a little bit more.
No, I love that. Actually, I love that. I think it's when you can make somebody feel seen, heard, appreciated, valued, and that can happen in your first interaction just by listening to them and hearing about them. What a difference you make in somebody's life. Like those are just
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Right. And like I'll give you an example. My daughter ate new pasta from Costco, and she's like, oh, it's weird. I'm like, is it weird? It's just meat stuffed pasta. And she was like, well, I guess it's not weird, it's different. I'm like, right. But if you said weird, do you think somebody else would want to try it? If you
right.
say different, if you say interesting, right? Doesn't it
Yeah,
make it sound a little bit more inviting? And she's like, oh, yeah. So, like, we make that mistake too all the
yeah,
time, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. How about on the twist? What's been something unexpected that's been a positive?
In entrepreneurship, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I guess, you know, when I was internal, you you feel like you own everything. You own the outcome. You own whether or not people have bought into what you're trying to teach them. And so coming outside of the tornado, two things. I think it's very freeing that you no longer have to internalize all of the things that are happening, because you don't own the outcomes, right? You're
yep,
just helping people build a better infrastructure. You're inspiring people to think a little bit differently. And so I don't have to, point out, okay, this is wrong in your organization, you're not doing this. Instead, I get to choose to work with organizations and leaders who are already wanting to think differently and know they have to evolve in order to compete for talent, compete for business. I don't have to start from scratch, and
right.
I get to choose the people that I align my values with
Yep,
too, from a client perspective. So that has been, I think, the most positive experience of the last 8 months, for
that's
sure.
amazing. That's great. I know what you mean by that completely. So awesome. All right. Well, you also have a podcast, Tune Up Your Warrior.
I do. I do have a podcast. Thank
Let's
you
hear
for
about
bringing
it.
that up. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think it's back to that storytelling, right? Like, storytelling for me has always been how I learned about other people. If you look at my friends group, even, there's so many different people from all different backgrounds, age groups, geography. And that's really because, like I said, stories really help us bridge those gaps to
Yeah.
understanding. And so that's why I created Tune Up Your Warrior, because I think that when did we stop being able to have conversations, like real meaningful, respectful conversations with people that share different perspectives than we do,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
in realistically learning from different perspectives, as we touched on before,
Yeah.
is how we are going to solve complex problems, drive innovation, even learning a thing or two, right, along the way.
Yep.
But we can't do that if we're closed off, like you said, have our body armor up, if
Yep.
we have to be right all the time. And so, yeah, I created this podcast as a way to challenge some really important topics around the world that are impacting
Love
each
it.
and every single one of us right now. But it's called Tune Up Your Warriors because someone once told me to tone down my warrior
Yeah.
and stop sharing my stories and personal experiences because they were making others perhaps uncomfortable. And so that was the genesis, and it's kind of picked up a life of its own right now. So thanks for mentioning that, and I hope everybody gets a chance to tune into my podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love that, when somebody tells you to dial it down, bring it back up and bring
You
it back
turn
up
it
louder.
all the way
Yes,
back
you
up.
do.
And like people, like they should know better. I'm an experience. I'm a lot. I can't tone myself down even if I tried, you
Yeah,
know?
but honestly, and when we talk about it, and I think here's the other thing is that we're talking about something that could make people uncomfortable, but if we don't keep talking about it, how are we going to have change happen? How are we going to change the trajectory of where we're going? So, have the uncomfortable, loud, scream it conversations so that people understand where there's issues, where people like yourself can go in and help.
Yeah. And I'll give you a very good example of that. Our indigenous communities in Canada right now,
Yeah.
all the things that we've learned about indigenous communities, I never learned about in history books growing up in school. I didn't learn about Chinese history growing up in Canada. And if we don't share these really difficult experiences in our history, these
Yeah.
stories that, really dehumanize people, we risk repeating the same things over and over and over again. So, back to what I said before, just because we don't talk about racism doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like, just because we don't talk about these experiences that we go through and, in each of our individual lives doesn't mean they don't happen. But
Yeah.
how can we learn from them?
Yeah. No, I love that. And again, if we're not talking about it, nothing's going to change.
Exactly.
So, well, what's one thing you want our listeners and everyone to know about yourself and the work that you're doing?
That's a great question. I thought about this actually for a while. I would say that I really want people to know that I am not a quote unquote DEI consultant. Every time I walk into a meeting and I explain what I do, they're like, "Oh, you're DEI. You're a DEI person." No, I'm not actually. And
Yep.
because I've been running from labels my whole life, I'm not going to let anyone label me as a DEI consultant because nobody does DEI. Like diversity, equity, inclusion aren't buzzwords or check boxes. They're human values. They're principles that should be woven into every single thing we do. And so, I want listeners to really think about, why we think one person is more deserving of opportunity, of safety, of dignity, or even basic compassion and respect just because of who they are or aren't than somebody else. Like that concept to me is wild. So,
Yeah.
all I want folks to do is to remember that when we stop saying things like microaggressions, sexism, racism, homophobia, all of these isms that we've labeled, it comes down to treating one another with basic respect, kindness, compassion, and understanding that our experiences don't define somebody else's reality.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's beautiful. I always say, just be a good human. Like, the
Yeah,
kindness, the respect, everything else will figure itself out, but why can't we treat each other with the same dignity and values that we want to treat others with, like, that we treat ourselves with? And I love that you're talking about this, and I love that message that you just gave.
thanks. I hope it's, it's hard. It's hard as much as it is difficult to receive it
Yeah.
sometimes or to hear it, Emily. It is becoming more and more so exhausting to give it,
Yeah.
right? To share
Yeah.
it over and over and over again. But the world that we live in right now is a very good example of why this message continues needing to be driven forward, because when we start mocking black congresswomen out in the open, when we start to use dehumanizing language on our trans community, when we start saying that immigrants aren't worthy of basic human rights, safety, compassion, when we start to criminalize homelessness,
Yeah.
right? Like these are all things that I honestly I can't wrap my head around. And so I just feel there's more work to be done, and this message needs to be shared over and over again.
Yeah.
As exhausting as it is to share it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I it's funny, there's been situations where where you receive something so negative, and somebody's so negative, and things in the world are so negative. And I always say, this happened to me a couple weeks ago with a client situation. It was just so taxing. And I said, I have a choice. I can put that energy back into the universe, which is going to grow at a faster speed than if I just put joy and kindness back into what it is that we're facing. And, so I just feel like if we can stop and be good humans and put more joy and kindness into the world and treat each other, whether it's in the workplace or just on the streets, we're going to
Yeah.
be a better place to be.
Yeah, there's a Angela Davis quote that I heard recently that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it goes, I can no longer accept the things I cannot control, so I can change the things I can no longer accept. And like I feel that's the time, like
Yeah.
this is the era that we're in. I can't change the things that I can't control, right? Or sorry, I can no longer accept the things I cannot change.
Yep.
So I can at least try to change the things I can no longer accept. I think that we are all tired. Like
Yep.
it's exhausting. And even like trying to teach people how to be kind to one another, like when did we lose that? But again, until we see it, happen around the world, I think it really needs to continue to be pushed. And Jane Goodall, rest in peace, she said like hope is a social activity.
Yeah.
And so we can't create hope in our homes by ourselves, closed off to the world. Like we
Yeah.
have to go out there and inspire hope for everybody around us also. So, yeah.
I love that. And how can the Powered by Authenticity team help? What
I
can we
think
do to
you
help you, Jenny?
I think you're doing so much already, like even holding space for this conversation. And I think when you create spaces like Powered by Authenticity for honest dialogue, Emily, and perspectives that aren't always gonna land with everybody, but
Yeah.
should be heard. I think that we inspire people to think a little bit differently, and we remind leaders and organizations and everyday people that we can evolve, that we can do better. And it's not about shame or blame, but through curiosity, through compassion and courage. And so that's how real change is going to start. So thank you for creating this space and for giving me the space to share my story.
Yeah. Well, I have loved having you on here. I could talk all day, which typically is a problem for me because I love I love these types of conversations. I hope actually when we come up, so we spend a lot of time in North Bay, and so I'd love to actually try to connect some time in person and maybe come up through like Ottawa and around like we've done a couple
Yeah,
of times. It'd be nice to meet in
I'd love
person.
that. Oh my gosh, North Bay. That's it's really cold up there.
We love it. It's my favorite place on earth. That's where we spent Thanksgiving, and so family and friends, and it's just a beautiful place to be.
I love it. Yeah, it's actually a very like all of our Ontario towns on the outskirts of, Toronto, Ottawa, the metropolitan cities
Yes.
are so beautiful and picturesque for anybody who hasn't been through Ontario. All the lakes that we have here, all of the
Oh,
changing
so
colors that
pretty.
we have right now this season, it's a surreal place to be.
It really is. It definitely holds a piece of my heart. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you hopping on the show.
I loved being here. Thanks for spending your evening with me. Thanks for holding space for this super important conversation. Hope I didn't offend anybody with what I might do if this entrepreneurship journey gets a little bit too hard. But my husband's listening too, and I'm sure he's shaking his head and laughing. So thanks so much, Emily, for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. And dialogue is the key, right? And we're here to have authentic conversations and talk about things that are happening. And it's hard to be leaders, but we really need to have strong leaders guiding our organizations. And I'm just thankful for the work that you're doing, and I appreciate it. And I do want to thank producer Ken, who's helping remotely today, but he's definitely here helping support. So thank you, producer Ken, and Go Art. So a little art behind me. Jenny, we're in a community art center, and they have a podcast studio that they let us use every week. So it's really lovely.
I've seen your behind the scenes. It's beautiful there.
Yeah, it's so nice. And through the use of a grant, we can come in. So it's beautiful and lovely. And I talk about community support. They're just amazing. So, and thank you to our listeners. If you're new here, thanks for finding us. If you've been here for a while, thanks for sticking in there with us. We love every single conversation. And Jenny, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Have a good night.